that is focusing on independent journalism versus geopolitics. This is the ambassadorial panel that was mentioned earlier. So the topic is independent journalism versus geopolitics, a battle for truth in a fractured world. It will be moderated by the chairman of Alpha Media Holdings, Mr. Trevor Ngube. The panelists include His Excellency Ambassador of Canada to Zimbabwe, H.E. Adler Aristide, if I could ask you to come up. If I could ask the Ambassador of India to Zimbabwe, His Excellency Brahma Kumar. The Deputy Ambassador of Germany, His Excellency Michael Ott. If you could please come up, please give them a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as the ambassadors make their way up to the podium. Before I hand over to the chairman, allow me to call up one of the panelists, that is the Deputy Ambassador of Germany to Zimbabwe, His Excellency Michael Ott. He will make a presentation, I think, to set the scene and put the discussion into context. Your Excellency, Deputy Ambassador, if you could kick things off with your address.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, or we are at noon now. Seems very abstract looking at the title after the personal experiences that we have just listened to and that have impressed me very much. Independent journalism versus geopolitics, a battle for truth in a fractured world. Let's start with independent journalism. We haven't discussed the term yet. Are we talking about the possibility to work, write, and earn a living of the individual journalist? Are we talking about the relationship between the journalist and his or her employer? What about media independence undermined by ownership consolidation and pressure from advertisers? Or will we discuss the possibility of journalism to acquire information, to use different sources, to approach decision makers, to protect their sources, and finally, to have their factual findings as well as their opinion pieces being published? And what about the function of journalism as the fourth estate, meaning to inform the general public, holding decision makers, governments, corporations, etc., responsible for their action? Versus geopolitics. Is the independent journalist working on this meta level? Is she or he an independent actor, a partner or a foe in geopolitical questions, developments, in international relations and exchanges? Is the present geopolitical situation truly so different from former geopolitical changes as far as independent journalism is concerned? And then a battle for truth in a fractured world. What is truth? This we have touched a little bit. There is the well-known oath from the courtrooms to say the truth and nothing but the truth. But how often is that truth, as we see it, a matter of interpretation, of wishful thinking, of ideology, a result of our own heritage, prejudices, or simply a question of understanding or misunderstanding circumstances, motivations, and other influences? What about the fractured world? When has the world not been fractured? East-West, North-South, polarized societies in many countries worldwide. And what is the truth in all these situations? And how often has the so-called truth been the reason for fractures? Don't worry, I'm not trying to give the answers to all these questions, but we should have these questions in the back of our minds when we try to evaluate the importance of free speech, of free media, and of free and unfettered journalism. One of the first things that came to my mind when I started thinking about this event was my firm belief in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which stipulates in its Article 19, without any reservation or restriction, and I really think it's important to repeat the words, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. This says it all, and this is what we all should refer to. Officially and at least verbally, this fundamental human right is recognized and accepted in all and every country, enshrined in constitutions, legally protected by laws and regulations. Some concerning Zimbabwe have been mentioned here, but too often the reality is different. Power play, greed, radicalism, and self-righteousness violate this human right. On the positive side, many organizations and initiatives are trying to give life to this fundamental human right to protect independent journalism and journalists. To name just a few, the International Federation of Journalists, the International Press Institute, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, Global Investigative Journalism Network, Reporters Without Borders, OMA Regional, the African Center for Media Excellence, the African Network for Centers of Investigative Reporting, and I could go on and on. Within the UN system, UNESCO is mandated to support freedom of expression and the protection of journalists. Plus, well-known organizations like Amnesty, who are a partner in this event, or Transparency International and others which have a larger mission to defend human rights. Every effort to shrink the civic space, to limit possibilities for civil society organizations, endangers the freedom of expression and the freedom of the press. But these dangers for independent journalism and journalists are not new or unknown. Harbingers of news always had to fight and needed protection. Don't we know from the old text that messengers of bad news were sometimes put to death, while bringers of good news were showered with gifts, all which has influenced the quality since its inception. At those times, they were not called journalists, but once modern journalism developed, the dangers, threats, and the need for protection became more and more evident. Even more so when everywhere independent journalism became a cornerstone of how we want to organize our social and political interaction. Freedom of the press, freedom of expression are a lifeline of our way of organizing modern societies. This said, the reality also includes governments which are seeking to restrict freedom of the press and freedom of information, restrict access, to suppress debate, disseminate misinformation, and intimidate journalists or even make them disappear, all of which is totally unacceptable. Geopolitical developments have changed through the centuries and they continue to do so. And during all the changes, the ups and downs, in peaceful times as in war times, journalism played an important part for good and for evil. Today, geopolitics plays a role in efforts to exploit media as a tool for division, as a tool for disinformation, for the distribution of false or fake news. The dangers for independent journalism are manifold, and the threats are not just geopolitical trends. The reduction in numbers of readers, which has been mentioned, media outlets struggling for economic viability, media ownership concentration, and editorial interference. The ease of feeling informed through social media, very often without any reflection on the quality of those news and their origin from sources without the ethics and training of professional journalists. What will be, in the end, the consequence of using artificial intelligence in journalism? How to develop and establish digital responsibility for readers as well as for journalists? One lesson we should have learned by now: where press freedom is under pressure, freedom itself is in danger for everybody. Free democratic societies cannot exist without a free and diverse press. Democracy lives through an open exchange of opinions. And as Germans, I hope we have learned our lesson. And that is why Germany is deeply committed to the freedom of expression, is trying to defend media freedom, balancing these freedoms with questions of responsibility, fighting misuse and fraud. And believe me, also for us, it's not an easy task. What is needed is a consensus, a civic responsibility to stand up against all threats against independent journalism. Independent journalism needs independent journalists around the globe who must be able to continue to raise their voices and thereby make the voices of people in their home countries heard. Independent journalism in a fractured world means fighting disinformation and pushing back against digital censorship to boost media literacy in the age of artificial intelligence. By supporting and defending independent journalism, we defend our personal freedom and the well-being of our societies. And please let me end with one more thought. We should pay homage to the journalists and media professionals who die year by year in their line of duty, especially in countries of conflict, but unfortunately also outside countries of conflict. Hundreds of journalists and media professionals, Reporters Without Frontiers counted 550 in 2024, are imprisoned around the world. Being a journalist, living up to the high standards we expect from independent journalism needs courage. I applaud and celebrate everybody who chooses courageously pursue this profession against so many odds. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Ambassador. Ott, we'll now have the Ambassador to Canada, Mr. Aristide, please. Your 5 minutes remark.
Thank you, Trevor, and thank you all for having me. All protocols observed. I have to say, this is my very first time being in a literal boxing ring, and it feels a bit intimidating. And if I knew, I would have come equipped with my best fighting words, but I do have some in my back pocket in case I need them. It is an honor to stand before you today, representing Canada, in solidarity with Africa's vibrant and resilient media community. We're gathered today at a time when the truth and freedoms of expression are under siege, at a time when disinformation, censorship, and geopolitical manipulation threaten the very foundations of free and democratic discourse. Across the continent, independent journalism is facing unprecedented challenges. In Canada, we have witnessed the erosion of traditional media models, the rise of foreign interference, and the weaponization of information. In Africa, courageous journalists continue to report under pressure, often at great personal risk, in environments where press freedom is fragile and contested. We just heard those heart-wrenching but very brave stories from Blessed, from Faith, from Trevor, Becky, Amanda, Judy. And I was sitting there feeling quite sad on one hand, but also feeling quite incredibly inspired by their courage and their conviction and their commitment to continue doing that work. Despite these challenges, today we're united by a shared conviction that truth matters and that journalism is not merely a profession, it is a public good. In today's fractured world, more than ever, information is power. It can illuminate injustice, hold leaders accountable, and empower citizens. But in this emerging global environment, with deepfakes, deceptive AI, the blurring of lines between journalism and partisan blame throwing, information can be distorted, manipulated, and weaponized. As global tensions rise and the information ecosystem continues to fracture, and even as the integrity and safety of independent media are under unprecedented attack, we need to act. This is not a domestic issue to Zimbabwe alone. This is not an issue in Canada alone. It is a global problem. That is why Canada co-funded the Media Freedom Coalition, a partnership of over 50 countries committed to defending press freedom and protecting journalists. Canada also supports the Global Media Defense Fund under UNESCO to the tune of $4 million. It is a fund that provides legal and emergency support to journalists worldwide and journalists in this situation that Blessed Faith and others found themselves recently. In addition, we continue to speak out against violation of media rights in every corner of the world. In Southern Africa, through our small grants program, Canada Fund for Local Initiatives, we have supported media organizations in Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Malawi in empowering local journalists to investigate human rights, corruption, and misinformation. And as a diplomat who started off, and some of you know this, as a journalist before joining government and the Canadian Foreign Service, I believe journalism and diplomacy are very closely related. We are in the same business of communicating with increasingly fractured audiences. We share similar challenges in ensuring that we remain credible. And journalists and diplomats are important sources of information for each other, for one another. This cooperation happens in very open exchange of information that is visible to the public. It also takes place on background, behind closed doors, where trust is established and where it can be too complicated or too dangerous to share in the open. But I also agree with those who think that journalists should be cognizant of the risk being used in this relationship. With the lack of resources for original news gathering, it can be tempting to use what looks like news coming out, big corporations coming out, government entities coming out, diplomatic missions. And when they're only piece of very curated, well choreographed public relation advertisement that serves private interests and not the interest of the public. So I won't name them, but as I conclude, I wish to salute and congratulate all diligent and passionate journalists who do their work professionally, and all those media organizations that enable and support their journalists in the exercise of this honorable and vital profession. So today, I encourage all stakeholders in the room and not in the room to support good journalism, to protect journalists from harassment and violence, to combat disinformation through education and responsible legislation, and to ensure digital platforms are accountable to the public interest and serve everyone and all genders. Canada will always stand up for journalists in the defense of media freedom and against misinformation and disinformation. Journalists must be able to do their job free from threat or intimidation. Tatenda, Shabonga, merci. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. We're now going to call upon the Ambassador of India, Brahma Kumar. Ambassador, your 5 minutes. The good thing with when you're chairing a session of ambassadors, you can't tell them to keep quiet. You know, you just have to watch them, look at them, and hope that they read the look. Ambassador, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nikobe. And thank you, HSTV and Alpha Media Holding, for having me here. India is one of the most exciting and flourishing media landscapes in the world. It is a huge evolving market, throbbing with activity, dynamism, and experimentation. The Indian media and entertainment industry is a sunrise sector for the economy and is making significant strides. The increasing availability of high speed and pocket friendly internet facilities, rising incomes, and increasing purchasing power have significantly added the industry. The industry is well known for its extremely high volumes and rising average revenue per user. I will take a break here just to explain why I'm going on commercial. I think with these commercial figures, we can understand what are the challenges media is facing now. So now you can, now when I go to the second para, you can understand what I'm trying to say. India is rapidly emerging as a global creative powerhouse driven by its talent pool, cultural richness, and technological advancements. According to the EY report titled I Studio Called India, the country's media infrastructure is expanding with animation and VFX costs in India being 40% to 60% lower than those in the West, supported by a workforce of around 260,000 skilled professionals. This significantly aided the country's industry and made India leading in terms of digital adoption and provided companies with uninterrupted rich data to understand their customers better. India has also experienced growing opportunities in the VFX sector as the focus shifted globally to India as a preferred content creator. Between 2 to 2.5 million digital creators are influencing over US $350 billion in annual consumer spending and a number expected to surpass US $1 trillion by 2030. On this background, I have been asked to give a perspective on evolution of Indian media. The beginning of print media can be traced back to the late 18th century with the establishment of newspapers such as the Bengal Gazette in 1780. After the first publication, very soon, Indians were able to convert the press from a colonial tool into a medium for nationalist thought, effectively reshaping public discourse around issue of governance and rights. The 19th and early 20th centuries also saw a proliferation of vernacular newspapers, which were crucial in reaching a broader audience beyond the educated elite. The Mahatma Gandhi's use of journalism as a political tool cannot be understated. His newspaper Young India served as a platform for his ideas of non-violence and civil disobedience, reaching a wide audience and mobilizing support for various movements. And then comes a repressive regime of our colonial authorities, and we all know that how many times Mahatma Gandhi was behind the bar, including other so many journalists who are voicing support for free media and independence of voice. So the emergence of main political organizations such as the Indian National Congress in 1885 and the All India Muslim League in 1906 played a crucial role in formalizing the fight against colonial rule. These entities provided a platform for political discourse, allowing various voices to articulate the aspirations of different communities. The 1919 Amritsar massacre, where British troops killed hundreds of unarmed Indian civilians, became a turning point, leading to increased militancy among Indian nationalists, and that was reflected in press as well. As the freedom struggle evolved, it saw the rise of different movements by mass mobilization and civil resistance against British authority. Throughout this period, the resilient press emerged as a vital tool for communication and mobilization. The interplay between the press and the freedom struggle is critical to understanding how public opinion was cultivated and how it influenced the trajectory of the movement. The legacy of the press in the freedom struggle has had a profound impact on the post independence Indian press. The values of courage, patriotism, and the pursuit of truth that characterized nationalist journalism have continued to shape Indian media even after 1947. The experiences of the press during the freedom struggle have underscored the importance of press freedom as a cornerstone of democracy, a principle enshrined in the Indian Constitution. The Indian press remains vigilant in upholding the public's right to information, and the freedom struggle's journalistic heritage serves as a reminder of the critical role that media plays in sustaining a democratic society. Today, the Indian media, which is famously being called as the fourth pillar of democracy, serves as the intermediary between the government and the public, offering citizens a platform to be informed, voice opinions, and hold those in power accountable. Over time, the media has transitioned from traditional print mediums to a wide array of digital and social platforms, each posing its own set of opportunities and challenges. Almost a billion Indians today have access to the internet, with millions engaging actively across diverse social media platforms such as WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. I am referring to the internet and social media because the idea of press and media in India has undergone a significant transformation. A large section of millennials and Gen Z audiences now consume news and information primarily through digital platforms rather than traditional media outlets. The shift has also led to the rapid rise of independent internet journalism, challenging the dominance of conventional corporate media houses and reshaping the country's information landscape. In a world increasingly shaped by geopolitics, independent journalism faces mounting pressure from both state influence and global information wars, where narratives are often weaponized to serve strategic interests. The advent of AI has further complicated the media landscape, enabling the creation of deepfakes, synthetic news, and algorithm driven echo chambers that blur the line between fact and fabrication. As democracies grapple with this evolving reality, governments must find a balanced approach to regulating misinformation and technological misuse without undermining the core democratic principle of a free and independent press. Striking a balance between media freedom and the need to regulate harmful content remains a pressing issue. So, with these concluding words, I uh, finish my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, ambassadors, for those remarks. Shall I start with you, Deputy Ambassador, or you clearly laid out uh, the fact that the the UN Declaration of Human Rights is the underpinning document, but you went on to say that the world has always been fractured, and my question is there a truth that we all agree to, and what is truth as humanity? Because really, that's become the center of the issue, isn't it? Some people say there's climate change. There isn't climate change. There is science that supports climate change. No, there is no science that supports climate change, and so many other issues. We are fractured, and your view is we've always been fractured. Have we always disagreed on what truth is, Ambassador?
I'm afraid yes. I'm afraid yes, because none of us is in a position. I think one of the good things being a diplomat is you get around the world and you see how at different places things are understood, treated, excuse me, and interpreted. But even that, learning that is done through a mind of the country that I've grown up in. And being abroad has made me also more conscious about how to evaluate what I hear at home as told to be the truth. So I do not believe in absolute truth. I do believe there's always interpretation. There's always the way how to through which eyes you see the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe the point when where we get together about the question of meaning of democracy, because for me there's no doubt if there is no free press, there cannot be a democracy, and without a democracy there cannot be free press.
To press you on that point, in what way? Because what's interesting with what you're saying is that you're being a diplomat, being exposed, being able to travel, has exposed you to certain few things about what humanity, how different we are. Has media played a role in that understanding for you?
It has played a role for my main task, and that is to inform my superiors in Germany about what I realize is happening in the guest country I'm being posted, and maybe to help to explain or to avoid misunderstandings, because the interpretation of Germany has a different interpretation from what the US used to have as an interpretation of free speech, because we have had a historic experience of a Nazi state. We have had a communist dictature that's not that long finished. And so for me, growing up in West Germany, I learned what it means to cherish free press and free information. And now going abroad and seeing, and I've been in India, for example, a very vibrant media and press society, you say rightly. But also you have your particularities about things are handled, and these particularities are influenced by religion, they are by origin, by minorities, majorities, etc. So these differences, that is what I've learned, what my profession has made me to understand much better as when I would have stayed only in Germany, and to bring that back home to those people who are taking political decisions in my country. That is my understanding as part of my job to do that reporting and to raise that conscience.
Ambassador Aristide, former journalist, you are now an ambassador. In a way, we live in an environment where we have so much information, and yet our differences are expanding at the pace of the expansion of media. Is that an accurate reflection of what we're experiencing? Get this one. Take on. All right. Yeah, I'm good with this.
I would agree with that statement. And I think the fracture that we've seen in the media and the fact that uh, right now, if you go on YouTube, you'll find an infinite number of people delivering news to you or opinion to you. It's impossible to differentiate between those who've had journalism training, who has certain ethics, and those who are being paid to be shrill from for a particular corporation, for a particular government, for a particular ideology. So clearly, it is a very complicated world that poses enormous challenges for all of us who are trying to engage with media in a democracy. And I want to add a couple of words on that. The first one is that I think it's Churchill that was credited with saying that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. And that means that democracy has been around for centuries, and there has been periods where democracy has functioned well, and we've seen examples in Europe, in the Americas, and throughout the world. And there are pendulum swings that happened at some point. Um, democracy seems to be sweeping the world, and at other points it seems to be in retreat. And I think we are in one of those periods where democracy seems to be in decline. I think we forget sometimes that democracy has features that are essential for it to function: independent media, an educated citizenry, accountable institutions. And it's not the concept of democracy that is in question, it's the practice of it. And the way it's being practiced now, there is reason to despair about where it's headed. But I think one thing we need to remember is that it doesn't guarantee that a demagogue won't be elected. It doesn't guarantee that a liar won't be elected. And it gives you the opportunity to choose. And it can also be self-serving for a government who does have a constitution that um, present a democratic system, and then to say, you know what, well, let's not worry about democracy. Well, no, it needs to be a consensus in society to move away from that system. You can't just declare while you're in power that democracy doesn't work for us.
I think there's something wrong with this one. Can you hear me? Yeah, you can. So you talk about the swinging of the pendulum. In terms of the noise, in terms of the disagreement, what are your thoughts about where the pendulum is swinging right now regarding media and independent media and democracy?
Um, I'm not one to despair and think that it's all over. We've been to significant world wars that they embrace the entire world, and we've recovered from that. It does seem like it's not just democracy; the entire global order is being upended, and who's the superpower that is moral and has the best interests of the world at heart. We don't know, and I don't want to be here pointing fingers at anyone. But also, as as an embassy of Canada or any other embassies, we accept that it's for the people in their countries to decide what political systems work for them. And, we have an embassy in China, we have one in India, we have one in Russia, we have one here. So we're not out there dictating everyone that they should be exactly like Canada or like Western world. We're there to see how to engage, and there are rules of the game. When we feel that the rules are not being abided by, we tend to voice that opinion. But it's not for us to determine what any population should do. Although we have a bias in favor of democracy because we have seen it work. It has worked at home, and it has worked in the world for a long time.
Thanks, Ambassador. In India, Ambassador Kumba is, like you're saying, 1.4 billion people, the biggest population right now in the world. Media is very vibrant. What's your sense of what you see the world report on India? Does it sync with your understanding of what India is, or the world press represents a different media to you?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a very good and a very valid question. So as no, with that commercial figures and numbers and the development of Indian media, the way I was trying to explain, basically it also that history of India also mirrors the present of Indian media, what is happening today. So earlier, just before us, the panel which we had Mr. Malanga and Faith and their friends, they have all seen if they speak free, what happens to them. And but then there is one also a very subtle fact that I can say that at least the government of Zimbabwe had institution which ensured that they are out of the prison also. So the same thing was happening in India as well. During colonial time when Indian leaders, I can name Mahatma Gandhi, but there were several leaders who were journalists also. So basically, India is an example where journalists were not only writing the papers or writing the pamphlets, they were also executing that. So like we have a name of one revolutionary named Bhagat Singh. So he was writing books, diaries, pamphlets, and British government was not listening. So what he did, he exploded a bomb in the parliament, and he then he gave a speech also that I am ready to arrest it. I have to explode the bomb because you were not listening. So Indian freedom struggle gives various identities come together. And then post independence, what happened? Like personally, I feel I'm not saying that it is a government of India policy or their statement. I am not repeating their statement. Since you asked me personal question, and so I'm telling you. So post independence, you see, there was a partition. So Pakistan came, and then there was East Pakistan. 71, it became Bangladesh. So after partition and then question of minorities was something it was flagged again and again by Western media. So if I can say in a nutshell, certain newspapers and certain British media also, their prophecy was that it is just a 10 to 15 years we will see many Pakistan in India, because there are various nationalities, but they forgot that Indian press under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi or Jawaharlal Nehru and other leaders, the press was able to mobilize people for a identity which is called India. So now you see, even after 80 years, India is able to survive, and now we can see in certain Western countries, and the name of minorities' rights, separatist people are being supported in the name of human rights. So so there is a very difficult thing to understand, if suppose that say for example Khalistan. So basically, Ambassador, please don't mind, I am just putting the perspective. So for Khalistan, so they get support from human rights organizations in many other countries, and funding also. So what happens then? You see, the revenue which media is generating. So we must understand that behind those media which is voicing these kind of support, there are commercial interests as well. So again, challenge come, then where free media stands. Like you see, old media houses in India, now they are becoming a private corporate. So for a corporate, now they are in that, they are listed companies, so they have to generate revenue. They have shareholders. So now what happens? Like, for one example, I just tell you, like there are two three very reputed news channels. So but when the corporate hand changed because of IPO and all those issues, so some journalists, they left the organization. And because of then again the challenges which comes like social media, YouTube and other platform, that become like, means virtuous elements for them. So they came there and they are doing their free and independent journalism, like, firing the government. Basically, my understanding that media has to be against establishment. It is a thumb rule. You cannot be supporting the government, basically. So, and government, and basically free media, they help the government when they find out these kind of loopholes which is going against the public, and it helps the government to serve their constituency much better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ambassador. We need to close, but as I close, I'm going to ask you each one question that I hope you're going to respond to, which is, you've said through the session, throughout the day, you've had people speaking and so forth. What's the one thing that struck you, Ambassador Ott, from what took place today, as briefly as possible? What's your biggest takeaway from what you've learned today?
The need for education.
Need for education.
We have to train journalists, but we also have to raise the level of digital competence on the reader side as well as on the journalist side.
Fantastic. Ambassador Aristide, your one takeaway? I know you disagree with me on democracy, but we're going to sort that over lunch, all right?
And I don't believe democracy is the only system that works. We've seen other systems work. I think there's a bias in favor of certain outcome when you're in a democracy. What I would say is media funding is the significant issue that I see. So if people are not paying for their news, and so how exactly does an independent press survive? And, some people are even skeptical of donors giving money to media, because what are you looking for in giving that funding? And that can also color how people see media who receive funding from embassies. So then if it's advertisers, people have the same tendency to think they're in the pocket of advertisers. So how do we get back to people paying for the news that they consume, whether it's in print, whether it's online? And I think it's going to be an issue for a long time. That's how journalism survived. To me, is by finding that paywall that people accept to pay in order to access content.
Thank you, Ambassador Aristide. Ambassador Boom, what's your takeaway from sitting through and listening to people?
See, free journalists are a need of the society. So they have basically, as I understand from the panelists, they had their moral conviction to speak out, because they are meant to speak, because God has designed them in a way, but they are speaking for the society. So society should also try to understand and support them. Basically, without support of society, they cannot go much further. So it is very important. And if I can recall one uh, incident, it was, I think, a book of history of Standard Oil Company published in US in 1906 somewhere. So that resulted in, like, winding up operations of Standard Oil, if you remember, and they were able to create a mass opinion against a Rockefeller.
Is this thing working? It's working. We don't take for granted, ambassadors, your presence in a gathering of this nature. For us, it gives us encouragement. You heard the stories that Blessed, Faith, and them were sharing. Very heartbreaking stories, very painful stories. And to have you spend the morning with us and a big part of your day means a lot to us. So thank you so much. Guys, join me in giving them a round of applause. Thanks, ambassadors. Thank you.
Thank you.